United States intelligence does not confirm any attack on Putin's residence in the Novgorod region, so the White House should reject Putin's new demands. Trump's team stated that Ukraine receives drones and missiles over its capital every night, and all Ukraine can do in response is defend itself. This is the statement made by the United States Permanent Representative to NATO, Matthew Whitaker, and Whitaker also caught Putin lying, quote, "You know, it seems a bit tactless to me to be so close to a peace deal. Ukraine really wants to make it, and then to do something that will be perceived as reckless or of little use. So we'll find out through intelligence." For me, the most important thing is what the United States intelligence services and our allies will say about this. As a result, Western media today, on the first day of the new year 2026, are writing that the negotiations to end the war in Ukraine have reached a stalemate. But it is Donald Trump who remains the key player in them, and on the first day of 2026, many are wondering whether Donald Trump will finally take responsibility for resolving this war of Russia against Ukraine, or if he is ready to appease the aggressor. On the eve of the new year, the United States Embassy in Moscow unexpectedly warmly congratulated Russians on the holidays and stated that Russia and America supposedly have shared values. But at the same time, insiders assure that Trump's patience is running out, and he is finally ready to go down in history as the one who helped Ukraine win. And Trump is already ready to say that this is, after all, his war. But for that, he will have to give up illusions, to give up trading with Russians after the war. But Trump can get something even greater. My name is Pechiy. Let's discuss this topic together, and I ask you to subscribe to this channel, give it a like, and don't forget to leave your comment. Also, subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechiy News. The link to it is in the description of this video. Friends, you know that I analyze a lot of facts every day, but today I want to talk to you about feelings on the channel of my favorite psychologist. Without false modesty, I'll say that a video was released that I myself watched with great interest. It's about January 1st as the day of collective digital hangover. We're not even awake yet and already overwhelmed by the news. So, the video that I strongly recommend you to watch is exactly about how to simply remain human when the world around is slowly going crazy. That's the best thing you can do for your mind. Today, January 1st, the link to the video is in the description of this video and in the pinned comment, and it also appears on your screens, so go ahead, watch it, and send regards to the author from our channel. So, as the Wall Street Journal writes today, the main news on January 1st is the quiet peace talks, as a result of which Ukraine and President Donald Trump have come closer together. When Trump noticed changes in the political landscape, both in his own and in the context of the war. And it's not that Putin decided to quickly cook up a story about an attack on his residence in order to disrupt these very negotiations. The main news was the allocation in the last days of December of $105 billion of European funds to Ukraine for 2 years, which removes uncertainty about Ukraine's stability and disrupts the optimistic timeline that President Vladimir Putin of the Russian Federation had developed. Putin had already calculated that the United States wouldn't help Ukraine and that Europe would be afraid. And then, already in 2026, Ukraine would be forced to capitulate, since it simply wouldn't have the resources to continue its defense. Well, now time is once again on Ukraine's side. Funding for Ukraine from the European Union is slow, but it's real progress on the path to Europe's own strategic maturity. This is the best sign since the still underestimated decisions by Finland and Sweden to join the North Atlantic Alliance after the Russians tried to occupy Kiev in 2022. Well, besides that, the last days of the past year were also marked by clear signs of weakness from the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin. In particular, there was a public meeting with his military commanders, where he received an exaggerated report about their successes at the front and the supposedly inevitable military collapse of Ukraine. Putin was boasting loudly that the Russians would soon capture both Zaporizhzhia and Sumy, not to mention the entire Donbas. Partly, Trump believed all this, because after meeting with Zelensky, he even stated that Ukraine should make a deal as soon as possible, since Russia would capture even more territory. But that didn't work, and Ukraine continued to stand its ground, because Europe was finally behind us and had finally decided to take action. And that's when the Kremlin came up with the story about the attack on Putin's residence. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, Sergei Lavrov, was spreading the story about an alleged insidious attack by 91 Ukrainian drones on Putin's not-so-secret residence in the Novgorod region. The story's lack of evidence or witnesses doesn't matter. What matters is that people began discussing it. And this gave the Russians a reason to tell Trump that Ukraine doesn't deserve the security guarantees promised to it by its Western allies. And here the Wall Street Journal writes, and I quote, "It is known that Lavrov has been trying for many years to leave his post in order to enjoy an incredibly wealthy retirement and his alleged collection of real estate abroad. But Putin won't let him leave. Although the world already understands that Lavrov is just a puppet, and his latest address sounds, almost like some kind of robot recording."
On the night of December 28 to 29, 2025, the Kiev regime carried out a terrorist attack using the 91st Long-Range Strike Unmanned Aerial Vehicle against the state residence of the President of the Russian Federation in the Novgorod region.
But the President of the United States, Donald Trump, in this whole story acts as a neutral, indifferent mediator, and for some reason he gets away with it. Even when his administration supplies weapons to Ukraine, conducts exercises, and provides tactical intelligence. Trump himself pretends that he is somehow above all this, and that he is just an arbiter. Putin accepts this, and the continued support of United States intelligence may not be publicized, but it's also not really hidden. United States weapons are still being supplied to Ukraine, even if through Europe. Trump's authority is officially not tied to any specific outcome except for establishing peace. However, Trump acts as if a neutralized Ukraine still would not serve his interests or the interests of America. And this is where the trickiest part of the game begins. In reality, Trump, like any politician, moves forward cautiously, weighing his many conflicting interests. Right now, this makes achieving real peace impossible, since it rules out the possibility of using a stick to change the calculations of the Russian dictator, Putin. For now, Trump intends to use only the carrot as much as possible, promising Russia trade and joint business in exchange for stopping the war. But 2026 could be the very year when Trump, perhaps not publicly, but will declare that from now on, this is still Donald Trump's war. He will be forced to escalate the conflict with Putin, in which Trump will undoubtedly win, but it will cost him some of the Make America Great Again support. This won't earn him any new respect from the Democrats or Republicans who never supported Trump and have been demanding exactly these actions from him since his return to the White House. But it's time for Trump to finally make a decision. And here I can assume that probably Donald Trump sees himself in the role of Richard Nixon, the 37th President of the United States. That is, if he takes responsibility for the war he inherited, he will face a barrage of criticism from those he inherited this war from. Let me remind you that it was Richard Nixon who tried to end the Vietnam War from the very first days of his presidency, although at first he also called this war the war of his predecessor. So it's exactly the same story, but Nixon managed to do it back then, and that's the role he ended up having in history. But here, to use Trump's own language, the main cards have already been dealt. Until Trump decides to take responsibility, the war will remain at a stalemate, and Putin will keep looking for at least some plausible explanation for victory. What about beginning to offset Russia's strategic losses? Moreover, until Trump takes control of the situation, Putin will keep making up attacks on his residents to disrupt negotiations. And here I'll quote the Wall Street Journal again: Ukraine's defeat is unacceptable for NATO and Europe. The European Union has so far put aside the questionable idea of using Russia's frozen assets, an idea that was pointless, because Europe is already wealthy enough to support Ukraine while keeping Russia's assets frozen. But Europe always finds it difficult to act decisively within its own strategic interests. The United States and Europe could do more to reduce Russia's vital energy revenues, but they are making progress, and it is starting to show results. How do Ukraine's attacks on Russian oil refineries and the tanker fleet in the Black Sea contribute to this? In this unclear situation, China's interest in the war is important and complicated. Beijing fears the precedent of defeat and the overthrow of Putin, but it also sees many advantages in the slow collapse of Russia. Trump remains a decisive player. He could accelerate a settlement, but to do so he would have to take responsibility for the events in Ukraine, which currently contradicts his own interests. However, his position may change in his second term as he approaches the end of his second term and the loss of influence. It's important to note that analysts have observed that Trump is already behaving like a president who sees opportunities for influence in foreign policy when his domestic position will inevitably weaken. It's clear he peaked in his first year, but then his domestic American position started to collapse. And that's why what's needed is a foreign victory to show that the president is still going strong. It's possible that Trump will reassess the situation in Ukraine, especially after the midterm elections in Congress. After all, he's attracted to teams that are already successful and mobilize resources on their own, so he can come in, intervene, and take credit for their achievements. He likes situations where someone has almost achieved success, and he comes in, helps them reach it, and says, "Well, this is entirely my achievement." When he loses the Republican majority in Congress, he'll have to quickly shift his focus to external victories. And right now, many analysts actually agree that Trump will shift his focus specifically to the issue of the war between Russia and Ukraine. If you've watched up to this point, I once again recommend you check out the New Year's episode from my favorite psychologist. I've left the link to that video in the description of this video and in the pinned comment. So go ahead, watch it, subscribe, and send greetings from our channel. I'll leave it at that. Subscribe to this channel as well, and make sure to hit the bell so you get notifications when new episodes come out. Happy New Year to everyone. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye.